Welcome to the first episode of the 4 a.m. Empire. This is your co-host, Miguel Aldrete,
Edgar Castellanos, and Salvador Covarrubias.
Our guest today is Emmanuel Berrelleza. Emmanuel will share his story on how he overcame adversity to graduate high school in just 3 years and got accepted to some of the most prestigious universities in the world.
He also teaches us the steps on how he created his own nonprofit called Face It to help low-income families in the third world countries.
I hope you enjoy this episode and welcome to the 4 a.m. Empire.
Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of 4 a.m. Podcast. What we hope to share today and in all the episodes coming is young people, entrepreneurs, but not only entrepreneurs, people who are creative, who are taking the first step towards their dreams and goals. And it takes a lot of hard work. Both Edgar, Sal, and I have built companies, businesses, written books, started YouTube channels, all these different things. And it's a lot of hard work that goes into it, that goes on behind the scenes. So we want to bring that to light with the guests that we bring in. So today we have our guest, Emmanuel Berrelleza, from Dartmouth, originally from Las Vegas, Nevada, but now he's traveled all over the world inspiring people with his nonprofit called Face It, which is focused on being able to truly help low-income people, low-income students around the world. So, Emmanuel, thanks for coming and being our first guest.
Thank you for having me, Miguel. So as Miguel mentioned, Face It is a nonprofit. We recently changed our mission. Originally, when I first started it in 2015, I was 15 years old. And the original mission was to help struggling communities in Latin America. And I don't know if you want to get into the details of it now or...
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing we want to share, when you got started, what was the idea or what's a little bit of background about you that gave you the idea to start that nonprofit?
Yeah, of course. So I think something super essential, and not only getting to know me, but I guess the nonprofit itself, is that both of my parents are from Tijuana, Mexico. We're currently in Chula Vista, so it's about a 15-minute drive across the border. And I have 7 other siblings. I'm the second youngest. And so what sort of got the idea going sort of stems from my background. My freshman year of high school, so in 2015, I just started high school. And around that time, my dad lost his job. And so when you're the only income earner, or the majority of your paycheck comes from one income, and all of a sudden that isn't there anymore, it obviously created a lot of financial hardships for me and my family and my siblings. And so during that time, my dad found work eventually in Tucson, Arizona. He worked there for about 6 months, and then he found work here in San Diego for about another 6 months. So for about a year total, he wasn't living with us. And then before that year, there was about 3 months where he was just unemployed, and we were living off of whatever we could, right? We'd get food from donation centers. If we ran out of clothes or if we needed something for school. I was fortunate that I had older brothers, so if I needed clothes, I would have clothes from my older brothers. But obviously with my sisters and, school is expensive. If you want to do sports, you have to fill out that athletic packet. You want to do track, you got to buy shoes. There's just a lot of small expenses that really add up, especially when your income is down to zero. And so during that time, it was just really difficult for me and my family financially. But when my dad moved to San Diego, we'd try to visit him about once a month. Even when he lived in Arizona. And so each time we came to San Diego, we'd go to Tijuana because that's where my grandma is, my aunts, uncles, my cousins. And so my frequent interactions, going to the border and then coming back once a month, sort of forced me to put things into perspective. So I don't know, I'm sure you guys have crossed the border, and as you exit, there's a bunch of kids selling chicles, gum, bracelets, doing tricks, literally putting fire in their throat so that you could give them whatever change you have, if you give them change, because a lot of people just keep their windows closed.
Yeah.
And so I just saw the hustle of kids who were my age. I was 15 years old at the time. I saw the hustle of kids my age and even younger, as soon as you can walk and talk, they were out there in the streets really selling. I saw my cousins who were just struggling a lot more than we were. Even though we were poor, but we were poor by US standards, and being poor by Mexico standards or any non-first world country is completely different. Completely. And so even though we didn't have enough food or clothing, or we were struggling to make our rent and things of that sort, I saw the need in other countries, and I saw the fact that like if you didn't have food, you simply wouldn't eat, right? If you didn't have enough money to go to school, you just wouldn't go. And so I started like frequently seeing that. It made me think like like my situation right now in my household is not the best, but like at the very least I have a free education. At the very least we can go to a church a few blocks away, wait in line even though it's 1 or 2 hours, and get food that's expired, but at least we're able to get some sort of food, right? Even like school food is like not the best, but at least we had that.
Horrible food.
Yeah, it's so nasty.
Horrible.
And so that's sort of where like that's how the idea stemmed from me. I was like, okay, I don't have a lot now, but I know these people have a lot less. And we went to Mexico once a month anyways. So in my head I was like, okay, what can I do to help like just whoever I can, right? Like that's sort of the mindset. I didn't really have like an idea or a structure. I didn't even know what a nonprofit was at the moment. I literally just wanted to help. Because I saw like not only like myself in them, but I saw the struggles of like actual family members. And so the first thing that I started doing was I would just fundraise like enough money, like literally just like ask whoever I knew from like church or like any like teachers and stuff at school. We'd fundraise enough money to buy just enough like for tortillas, beans, rice,
Nice.
like literally the basics, beans, rice, tortillas. We'd make them at my aunt's house who
That's the
lived.
good stuff.
It's really
Better
good.
than school food.
It gets the job done, bro.
Yeah.
So when we went to Mexico, my aunt lives in a colonia, so it's like right outside of Tijuana. And at the general hospitals there, I don't know if you guys have been, but like people usually wait like hours outside because they're just usually over capacity. And so what we did was we just set up, like we bought like a bunch of rolled burritos, and then we just like started giving out like food, and we had like oranges. We had,
There
like,
at the hospital?
Yeah, outside of the
Okay.
hospital. To like jarras de agua de Jamaica and like water and things of that sort. And then I just like started like giving it out, and like people were like coming, like who weren't even in line, but like coming out from like the surrounding houses and stuff. And there's like a short line at one point. And so I was just like, okay, like this is good, like what more can I do? And so after about the second time, my mom is like really involved with a lot of communities in Mexico, and she got in contact with an owner. He's like the director of this Haitian refugee center.
Cool.
So I don't know if you guys know, but a lot of people who come from Haiti that are applying for like a visa or asylum or whatever sort of residency in the US, they all always pass through Mexico. And this is true for Haitians, Central Americans, etc. They all always go through Mexico. Inevitably, they come through Tijuana, Mexicali, Chihuahua, like all the border cities across from Texas as well. It's usually where they come. And so there's this Haitian refugee center where it was just like a big building, and they like slept inside. And the director said that I talked to him. I was like, what's the biggest need here? And he said they just needed a water boiler because they haven't had warm water for a long time, and it was like winter, and like it's so cold in Mexico, especially during the night.
And that's like a basic need, you know, that like a warm water. I don't
When's
even
the last
think
time
about
you guys
that.
showered without warm water?
I mean, forcefully, I like take cold showers to wake me
No,
up.
Boost
but-
your immune system.
I don't go in.
But I've never thought, not once in my life, like, am I gonna turn the faucet on and not have hot water?
No,
you know?
that's true.
Like, that's crazy.
And the thing is, like, there's a lot of, like, it's not just adults from Haiti, it's, like, younger kids as well. And, like, I saw babies there and, like, young kids. So I was like, okay, how much does a water boiler cost? Which is, like, $300 converted to pesos at a current, let's see, maybe, like, what, 60,000?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
60,000 pesos,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot if you're living in Tijuana and you're literally just operating off of donations. So I was like, okay, bet I think I could fundraise this money. Like, $300, you could, like, get that money one way or another in the U.S. if you really just, like, you'll figure it out, right? So that was sort of my mindset. I was like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to get this money, but I'll figure it out. So around that same time, when I started doing bigger things, like, it wasn't frijoles and rice and tortillas anymore. Like, now I needed $300, which is significantly more. I started realizing that when I asked, like, principals and stuff, and just, like, within the school district, I was really involved with, like, National Honor Society and student government. So, like, I had access to administrators to potentially do fundraising. All of them said that they needed this thing called the tax ID, like the 501c3 tax system status. And so that's what started to get me thinking. I was like, okay, I don't know what this is, but everyone's asking me for it, and I can't get any more money unless I have this tax ID status. So I went online, and with anything, I didn't have internet at my house at the time either. So this is sort of like the very basics of everything that happened afterwards in my life. I started realizing that, like, even though we didn't have a lot, I think the first and foremost, the thing was just, like, gratitude for what I did have. I think before I started going frequently to Mexico, I was really upset at the fact that like I wasn't able to see my dad for over a year. I was really upset at the fact that my mom had to get 3 jobs. So she had one job as they were all part-time. She had one job as a lunch lady at our local middle school Monday through Friday, and then on the weekend she'd work cleaning at the country clubs, and then she would also clean houses like after going to the country clubs to like the really rich areas. And we didn't have a car, so she would take the city bus, and we lived in East Las Vegas, and she went like all the way across the city. So it took about like 2 hours taking public transportation. And my mom had like an injury like a few years before where her ankle broke. I think it broke. I'm pretty sure it broke. She had to get surgery and stuff, so she's walking on her feet for a long time. Like it started to hurt, and she would always come home just like exhausted. Her hands just like completely deteriorated from like the chemicals she had to work with, like cleaning all freaking day. And so I was like seeing my mom exhausted, seeing my dad not even there. My younger brother was in 7th grade, and he was like on the verge of failing middle school because like my parents weren't paying attention to him. You're like, you know, when you're in middle school, like you'll
It's a
get
vital time, you know?
exactly like you'll get away with as much as you possibly can. And so at the same time, I'm trying to like be a good like figure for my brother, like, hey, like school's important, and he's like, oh, you're not my dad, like leave me alone, whatever. And my older siblings, like all of them had moved out at this point because we literally could not afford to like keep anyone at the house. So they went out, did their own thing, got their own part-time jobs, figured it out. However they ended up doing it. And so I was just like, so then there was me, right? Like my parents are out working, my younger brother's doing whatever he wants, my siblings are out of the picture, and so I'm just like at home with like no one to talk to. Like mind you, I had like a lot of siblings, and now like I have like no one to talk to. I don't have internet at the house, and I'm just like there. And we moved really frequently, and I remember this apartment, I think maybe we moved I think maybe it was like 6 months into moving. We moved during the summertime, and then around fall is when my dad lost his job. So like I didn't really have any friends in the neighborhood. And I just remember like what do you do with yourself at that point, right? Like you don't know anyone, you don't have internet, you don't have anyone to talk to. And so I think it also gave me like something to do with myself, right? So it wasn't just like wanting to help, but it was also like I can help. Like there's literally nothing else to do. Like I wasn't old enough to get a job to help my parents. I wasn't old enough to like help in any substantial way from like a financial standpoint for my
You were 15 at this point?
Yeah, I was 15, and so I was like, okay, like I can't do much. I tried selling things on Craigslist. I like made stuff, like I made like cupcakes, and I would like sell them for like 50 cents, like just like knock around the apartments. But like, bro, your profit margins after buying like the frosting and this, and then my mom's like, me estás gastando la luz, like I'm wasting the light bill, I'm like wasting the eggs and the flour. So like at the end of the day, I was like, okay, like this isn't working out. And so for me, like the whole idea of giving back was interesting because it was like I could use someone else's money and like at least like if not myself, then like help someone else. And so that's sort of how it got started. Anyway, so I came to school the next day, and we had like our library was open until 4 p.m. School ended around 2, and so I would just stay at the computers until like I had to go home. And I started looking up like how to start a nonprofit. That's literally all I looked up. Like nothing super complicated, nothing. I just kept hearing nonprofit, like, oh, you should have this. So then one thing I Googled was how to start a nonprofit, and then the second thing was how to get the 501c3 tax exempt status, because that's what I kept hearing from the administrators I was talking to. And so then slowly but surely, like there's so much information out there, and I think that's something like, again, realization number 2, I didn't know how much I actually had access to, because like we all have, or like the vast majority of students, even low-income students in under-resourced high school, chances are that there is a computer in a classroom or in a library that you can use, or maybe if you don't have a phone, then like use someone else's phone. Exactly. So there's also public libraries. So like when I couldn't go to my school, there was a public library like a few miles away from my home, and it took me forever to get there, but like $1 I paid the city bus, I'd go to the library, use the internet
Subscriptions to bus passes, friends rides.
Yeah, exactly.
Carpool.
Like there's like walk
Jump on
if
a
you
camel.
like literally walk. I don't know. Like I had, like I said, like I was 15. I had nothing to do. Like if I absolutely needed to, like, I would like walk to the library because I can't do anything else, you know. And so I started looking up, and I started reading like all these like publications like on the IRS on like what it is, how to apply for it. There was like this whole form, and so I don't know if you all have ever tried filing your own taxes before.
No, learning.
But it's very similar in this, like it's a very similar structure where you have like multiple lines, and it starts off with basics like what's your name, what's your address, and then it started getting into really complicated things like what's your business plan, what are your expected income, where are you getting it from, charity, real estate, all these things that I was 15 years old at the time, bro. I was like, I had no
Yeah.
idea what this was.
Hey,
They don't teach it in school.
You're ahead of the curve just trying to do that at
They
15,
don't teach
man.
you anything, bro. And then
I was playing Call of Duty at 15.
I started like talking to like my teachers, and they were just like, I have no idea what this is. Someone recommended I like call an attorney, because there's a lot of things I read online that said that usually lawyers, or like you pay them a one-time fee and they'll do it for you.
Yeah, but where were you gonna get the money for?
Bro,
an
it was like
attorney,
$1,000,
Like,
and like I didn't
That's
have
more
the money.
than the boiler.
It's more than, literally more than the boiler. I was like, dang, I don't know how I'm gonna like pay for this. And so because it was $1,000 for someone to fill it out for you, and then there was an actual fee for the paperwork itself that was like $850. And then on top of the IRS fee, you had to get like state licensing and like some other like thing from the Secretary of State. So it came out to about over $1,000 for the paperwork itself, and then another $1,000 for the attorney. And again, I'm like still 15. Like my dad's like freaking unemployed, bro. Like where am I gonna get this money from?
He's getting good.
And so around this time, I was also, so now I'm like, during this whole exploration, it's now about like spring term, still freshman year of high school. I joined the track team, and to fundraise for like some of our fees, our coach made a t-shirt with like the track logo, like Las Vegas High School track and field. And he sent us out to like get 10 pre-orders, sell the t-shirts for $10 to like help with like our expenses on the track team.
So who would you sell those t-shirts to?
I would just like knock around like my apartment complex.
Okay.
You did a lot of home sales, walk around, huh?
I
Starting
did
with cupcakes.
so much walking, bro.
That
Starting with
is-
the cupcakes.
That is horrible.
That's
How
why
did
you're
that
fit.
go,
That's
bro?
why you're skinny. You got track. You got.
How many cold
Well,
knockings you got going on?
I'll get to that. So surprisingly, with the track shirts, they actually sold like very quickly.
Oh.
Like they saw like, oh wow, like a school event. Like they obviously saw me like, I'm a young student. Like I want to like be in this track team. Help me pay for it. So like those shirts sold like very quickly, and so I was like, dang, like maybe I can like pay for this nonprofit stuff by selling my own t-shirts. So that's what I did, right? I went online. I like looked up as many long what is it, like, you know, like those shirts that you can make on your own, like online.
Yeah.
So I went on one of those. I just used like their basic templates, and then I started like talking to my dad about like my new idea. And I think for my dad, he was like very excited about it, because up to that point, like from my dad's perspective, like he also left his family, and he's also been out of the house for like 8 months at this point. And so hearing like his son like excited about like something, like we really just like went back and forth. And at the end of the day, like we came out with the name Face It. And the reason we named it Face It was because, well, there's a few reasons. One, it was sort of like personally, it was like I had to face my circumstances, right? It's like, face it, like my dad's not here, my mom's working, we don't have this, we don't have that, but we have to face it. Like there's literally no other way. If you try to like pretend it doesn't exist, if you try to like, I don't know, do nothing, it's so easy to like fall into like a downward like depression and not being able to do anything. And I think I've always been raised with the mentality that like, you have some sort of agency in your life. It might not be a lot, but at the very least, you have to face your realities, however hard or however it might be in your own way. And so we came up with the name Face It. And then I also decided to like name it Face It because I realized how apathetic a lot of people were towards the concerns of others. So like I remember one time I gave a speech, and this person was like, why are you trying to help people in Mexico if even people here in the US need help, like down the street? Which is like, it's a very valid concern, and it's a very valid thing. But for me, it was just like, okay, that is true, but like at least we can, like, and I took my life as an example. Like even though there were people with a lot of need, like my family was at the time, like at least there were measures in place to not go hungry. Like there were still donation centers, there were still school lunches.
True.
Versus like in Mexico, like there's literally absolutely nothing.
A lot of people don't understand that, right?
They don't understand that. And so it's again, like, face it, bro. Like there are concerns outside of our
Face it,
own
bro.
borders. And so I came up with the name Face It. I got like a little logo that I got on the template.
Was that the eagle logo from?
Yeah,
before?
that was the eagle
original
logo.
one?
And then I put an eagle on the t-shirt, and the eagle sort of represented, you know, just like the freedoms we have in the U.S. To pursue like whatever we want, because that's sort of when I was like started thinking about these things. And so I made a shirt, and then I printed it because the order came out to about $200 for I think maybe 30 shirts. And again, like
It's not bad.
I didn't have $200, bro. I have $0 up to this point. Like I don't have any money. So I did the exact same thing that my
Pre-orders.
track coach told me. Right, I took a screenshot, put it out on a paper, and then I just knocked on doors and I showed everyone the design. I was like, hey, I want to like buy this water boiler. I want to start this nonprofit. I need this much money. Will you like pre-order for a $10 t-shirt? And this was like so much harder than just selling the track shirts, bro. Because through track, it was like through school. It was like some
Yeah.
sort of guaranteed. But this is just me, right? Like, just imagine,
Just
like,
a random stranger coming up with a picture, not the actual shirt.
some, like, random 15 Mexican boy saying, like, hey, like, give me $10 and I will come back in 2 to 3 weeks when your shirt
That's
comes
true.
in
I didn't think about
and
that.
I'll give it to you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because,
yeah.
bro, like, they have to trust. Like, I'm pretty sure that
Ooh.
everyone who gave me the $10 expected to never see that shirt again because, like, how can you? Like, realistically, how can you? And,
That's
like,
true.
the neighborhood I lived in, like, it was also low income, right?
Mhm.
Like, I'm pretty sure they also don't have $10 just to, like, throw away like that. Or,
Yeah.
like, quote-unquote throw away because from their perspective, they're just, like, giving
There's
it out
no
to someone.
guarantee.
Exactly. There's zero guarantee,
They like
bro.
their hustle, man.
And so, well, sometimes some people just didn't even answer. And so I remember there was this one weekend. It was like late May now, so hot in Vegas. Like it could easily get like above 105, 110. And I was just like dedicated to like after practice, I would like rinse my face.
About that, bro.
I would like knock
Got warm in
on
here.
every door, bro. I would like there'd be blocks. Like I had like a map. I was like, okay, I'm gonna circle this and I'm gonna circle this and I'm gonna start knocking on this and whatever. So I had like my little game plan on like all the doors because I had to hit like the $200, $250 something dollars, and bro, the first day, like the first full day was Saturday. I think I sold maybe like 3 or 4, maybe 5 that entire time. Like
But-
people weren't buying
But
the shirts.
how many knocks?
Oh, bro, so many. Like 40 at least. I don't know. And it's
10% sale rate.
maybe less than that, honestly. It was hard because like some people just weren't home, or some people like would like peek. I would see them peek, and then they would just like ignore
Pretend
me.
like they
Be
were.
quiet.
Be
Yeah.
quiet, bro.
They
Turn
crawl-
off,
They
turn off,
crawl back to the
Yeah.
couch.
turn off the lights. And
What-
so, and, like sometimes, like if they weren't home, like I didn't know.
That's
how
what
long
I
to
used to
wait
do
for.
when Jehovah Witnesses would come knocking on my door.
Oh my god.
Crawl back.
What's the most replies you would get? Like, what's the common one where they say no?
They would just say like, "Oh, not at this time," or like, "Sorry, I don't have cash." That was a big one. Don't have cash. Like,
You should
It's
have
okay.
busted out the Cash App. I got Cash App,
But
PayPal,
that-
Nothing
Venmo.
exists
That
back
wasn't a
then.
thing
That's
back then.
true.
Cash Up wasn't a thing. Venmo wasn't a thing. Like, bro, I don't even think I had a phone. Like, how am I gonna like give them
borrow
the
your phone.
transaction? Let me borrow your phone. So, like,
Download the app on their phone.
I don't know, but so I just like kept on knocking, and I remember like one time like I was just it was like Saturday, like the sun was setting. I was like, okay, like I shouldn't be knocking on doors anymore. And I remember like I was just like crying because like my mom was like coming from the bus stop like close, and like she's obviously tired. My face is like burnt at this point, like it's like sunburnt because I also like I don't think I put any sunscreen on.
No one does.
And I was just like so frustrated because I literally just wanted to get this freaking boiler to the refugee center. Like that's all I wanted, and people for some reason or another were not wanting to buy these shirts. And so I just like kept at it like the day after and the day after that, and eventually I had enough money to put in that first order. And so the shirts that I sold, right, like I knocked everywhere again, and I gave them their shirts that they ordered.
Wait, quick question. How long did it take you? Because I'm sure people want to know how long did it take you to acquire that money? A week, a month?
To get the total amount.
Yeah.
From what point to what point? From the point that he decided
To-
that he wanted to get the boiler, or from the point he started selling shirts?
From the point you start selling shirts, because that's the income. Like you're starting the income,
Yeah.
and that's twice. You have to earn the 200 to then
Yeah.
earn the rest to get the
Right,
boiler.
Bro, when it was all said and done, by the time I had enough money for the paperwork itself and for the boiler and for that initial,
Paperwork,
it was
man.
easily like almost a year. It was like
Dang.
10 months, maybe a year.
He got cold water for a full year.
Bro, this was like
An
springtime.
additional
color
Yeah, you
were
have
you
a
by
good
that
immune
time,
system,
bro?
huh?
Bro, this was
You have
like
a great immune system. No
It's like
coronavirus for you.
springtime during like when I had the shirts, and then towards the end. So now it's like 2016. Towards the end of 2016, I finally got approved, or maybe I have the timeline mixed up like a year back. Probably right now, it's fine. Probably got this timeline mixed up like a year back, but it did take like months, at least 10 months to get everything done. Because another thing was that with the paperwork for the attorney, I ended up just filling it out all on my own.
Cool.
So I just took it like I was like, okay, like I can read, right? Like that was my basics. I was like, I can read.
Did you Google each thing?
I googled
That's
everything,
what I would
bro,
have done too.
line by line. So I was like, okay, and it literally starts with like line 1 through like however many lines, and I just went line by line, and whatever question I had that I couldn't find on the internet, I would just like make note of it, and then I would call the IRS every Friday, like right after school, because it would take
Oh,
like,
wow.
bro, it would take like an hour to get a hold of someone on the IRS.
That's smart.
And like beforehand, but that was after like week 2 of doing this. Beforehand, I would call them as soon as I had a question, and then I started realizing like, okay, this is going way too slow. And so I'm like reading all the publications that I can. I'm like getting all my phone calls, and like I remember once like I had a call back, so I called them like an hour before school ended, so that by the end the period ended, I would finally have someone on the phone. And I remember like I had like a phone once, and then like I had them saved under IRS in my contacts, so I could like call them quickly. And then
I don't have that contact.
Me neither. I have them blocked.
I remember my teacher was like, why is the IRS calling me? He was like, oh, hold up, like I gotta take this call. And so I remember it took me about a month. It took me about a month to like finally get through the entire packet, because there's like some lines that says like, if this applies to you, check yes, and if yes, you have to add another document explaining.
So you're hoping it doesn't apply to you.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, you're like praying it doesn't apply to you, but like sometimes it just does. And so it just kept adding more. It's like whenever I thought I was gonna finish, like I wasn't. I sent it in. Finally, I sent it in. I had enough money. Like at the exact same time, simultaneously, I'm like selling as many T-shirts as I can, and I start playing with the design too. So I just had like a plain white shirt, and people were like, "Oh, you should do colors." And so
you're going like you said, simultaneously, and I think that's important for a lot of people, because some people, they don't take that first step because they feel like they have to prepare all this stuff. Like,
oh yeah.
Like I could easily see somebody being like, "Oh yeah, I'll start a nonprofit," but then they're all like, "Oh, this paperwork, okay." They focus all their time there, and they like completely forget about the other part, right?
Yeah.
So what was the importance of like doing that simultaneously? You know.
I'm just gonna set this right here.
Put it on the mic stand. You can get it closer.
I like this.
That's true.
All right. The importance of doing it simultaneously, like, bro, there was like no other choice. Like that's literally like, cause keep in mind, right? Like there was no other choice. What else am I gonna do? Like I was already doing sports. Like my parents were like working, and for me, my biggest motivation was like seeing my parents.
Yeah.
I was like, they're working so hard, and the fact that they came to this country something years ago, and like got us even to this point to begin with, where like we can have a home to live in, and I have like the opportunity to live in the U.S.
Yeah.
And then like again, like just seeing my mom come home every single day, I was like, okay, like I don't really have a choice, but to like continue doing this for like, because I started there was something else like sort of magical that happened, like by helping other people and just by like doing what I was doing, I started realizing that like people take note of that. Like my other class, like I was a new student at the school, right? Because at this point I also moved 3 times. So I moved like so in the fall term when my dad lost his job, I moved schools. And then during that time, like the new school was really far away and like no one could take me. So then I had to move again. So at this point, like spring term, like I was moving schools left and right. I didn't have like any friends.
So you had a lot of potential customers. You had a lot of neighborhoods.
So many customers, bro. So many customers. Because the thing was too, is like,
right?
I ran for president, for freshman class president at my first school, and I won. So I was like, okay, bet. Like now I have like half the student government to like distribute these like shirts for me. And again, like
I got a game plan. I'm gonna take over this school,
bro. But I couldn't.
You had workers.
I couldn't do it because like I didn't have the tax ID status, and then I moved to the second school and I joined student government again. I was like, okay, like I have another group of people who are like willing to help me out. And then it was at the third school that I got to that I wasn't able to join student government for some stupid bureaucratic rules that they have. Literally, Miss Capitio, you were the worst.
I know. I felt it.
Dang, you just
She's the
slashed
worst
on her
bro.
right now.
You
She's
need
gonna
to
listen
know
to
that
this
you were
podcast.
just
Say the
on
name.
all
I want to hear the name.
I don't know.
Don't say the name. Don't say the name. Keep going.
Miss Capitio, check
We're gonna
yourself.
tag her down below.
Bro, I just,
Destroy your Twitter.
it was
No, I'm
just
kidding.
really horrible because I remember this is all happening at the same time. This is actually when I also decided to graduate high school early.
Oh, that's right.
Because like I wanted to
At
do
what
so
age?
many things. I think I was 16 now. So I was like 15. I like hated school. Like I was like my family's in a crisis and I have to come to. No, that's when I decided I wanted to graduate early. But I was like 15. I was like my family's in a crisis and school was just at all like it wasn't helpful at all, bro. In the first school it was like one of those like magnet schools, like those tech schools, where the kids were just like super, what's the word, like pretentious and like, oh, like I'm like smarter than you and this and that and like, you know, I'm like, bro, like I could barely get to school and now I have to deal with you guys and like the teachers and like the teachers like didn't really seem to be invested in me as a student. Like they didn't care. They were just like they were just, I don't know, they were teaching, but they weren't invested in me as a student, and I didn't really feel the love from them or the administrators. Nothing. It was just like another place to be, and it was really hard to focus. And so when I got to my third school, which I ultimately ended up graduating from, when they didn't let me join student council because of like, oh, the semester started, you should have started at the beginning of the year, and I'm like, I'm trying to explain to you that I was at a different school and my dad lost his job, and they just weren't like working with me at all. And I remember I wanted to take like AP classes, and like they didn't let me as well, for some like just administrative structural policy reasons. It couldn't get done, and I remember I was like I'm going to drop out, or I'm gonna like graduate early, because like this cannot go on for 4 more years. Like there's no way.
This is all still your freshman year?
This is all still freshman year, bro.
Jeez.
My dude selling shirts and graduating.
So like at the same time, right, I'm like doing these like t-shirts, and I'm like playing with like the design. So there's like lavender, there's black. People are like, oh, you should do tie-dye. So I started doing that, and then people started seeing very specific designs on the tie-dye, and they were like, oh, I want
What year
that
was
specific.
this?
This was 2016.
Okay.
This is 2016, bro. People, because it was now getting hot again, right? It was like summer. People were like, oh, you should do tie-dye, summertime. And then people would want like a very specific design of the dye, and I would like do my best to give them that, and like I wouldn't, like it's tie-dye, bro. You can't replicate tie-dye if it's by hand, and so it was just like a mess. And then I started, like, I made the mistake of getting the size distributions. So like obviously the most people are like small or medium when they're in high school, and I got like equal amounts on all, like equal small, equal medium.
I
Equal
started
large.
a t-shirt company when I was in middle school, and I did the same thing. And I realized, like, dude, they're not extra large. They're middle schoolers. Why do I have extra large shirts?
I went up to 2XL, and I got equal amounts of all of them. I don't know why. Until at the end, and it was after like 5 iterations of orders that I was just like, these XLs are not going to sell. Like I don't like.
There's not enough fat kids.
Bro,
You
there's just
still have them right now, like you use them as blankets and stuff.
I actually still have them. I still have them. Like they're there. I don't know.
I think that applies to every business, right? Where like in every business you got to know which stock to keep, right? Like you got to be able to have the right inventory, because if you get the wrong material or the wrong product that no one buys, you're just wasting money.
And that's a cost to you.
Yeah, it was a huge cost, because you're also buying it assuming that you are going to sell it.
Yeah.
That's how you make your projections. I mean, that's what I told the IRS anyways. They weren't selling, bro. So I was like, okay. I'm like readjusting here. I'm readjusting there. Finally,
I tell the IRS the right thing all the time. All right.
I don't know.
That
bro.
came out of him.
I'm hopping back and forth between timelines, but it's like, bear with me. Eventually, after submitting the paperwork for the IRS, I got it rejected twice, I think. Like they're like, sorry, we'll get to inform you because of like it was always something technical, like this was unclear or this was missing. And so finally, I think after the 3rd time, bro, I finally got it. I mean, this was December 15th, 2015. I got the letter and it said, congratulations, you've been approved for 501c3.
How did that feel?
Bro, I was on top of the world. First of all, I was like kind of in shock, because like I was like, dang, like I really did it.
Yeah.
Like I was 15 years old when I got that letter, and I was like, I really did it. And like I did it in like something so technical that like a whole paperwork, bro. I think
you needed attorneys, bro.
Dog, I needed attorneys. Like people pay people for this, and like I did it, and I don't know about you guys, but like where I come from, like when you're, and it goes back to like the prologue of my book. Like when you grow up and you're constantly told no, and you're constantly like sort of made feel less than, like you're less than capable, you're less than intelligent, you're less than whatever.
I love that.
Bro, it wasn't necessarily like my teachers, because like I always did well in school.
Yeah.
But it was my siblings, bro. They're my biggest haters. My biggest hate. Like I love you all to death. They're like my favorite people now, and we're really close. But when we were growing up, like we're like 8 people in like a small space. Like you're bound to get on each other's nerves.
Yeah.
And they were all, I'm the second youngest, so like 6 of them are older than me. And they were always just like trash talking whenever I did, or like, oh, like you're dumb if you think you're gonna do this, or like whatever, like you're stupid, whatever, right? And so for this, it was like I knew I wasn't stupid, because I quite literally would score like perfect on like state standardized exams, but like it still sort of gets to you, even with all like
just hearing it, negativity.
Yeah. And so like,
especially from family and everything.
Yeah.
especially from family, bro. And so I like when I got the 501c3, I was like, damn, like I really felt like no one can tell me like anything at this point. Like like, here's the proof, bro. Like, I don't even know if you could do this, right? It's like, finally, I had the 501c3, and so I was like, okay, like, now I can actually start fundraising, like, more formally through, like, schools and, like, the student governments and stuff that I joined and, like, the friends that I made at other schools. I was like, I could actually, like, get into more classrooms, get into more speeches, whatever.
Sorry to cut you off.
Go for it.
How important do you think that is for someone who is young and hasn't gotten to where they want to be, or even started, to get that first step of, hey, I can do this? Because I've been in that same position where, you know, like, a lot of people, they might underestimate you, or they might not think you have it in you, and then you actually do it, and not to prove it to them, but to prove it to yourself. Yeah. It just gives you, like, that whole next level of confidence to just keep going. Sure. So what would you think that plays into, like, the success that comes after that?
I think it's everything, bro. I feel like the only person you need to convince is yourself. Like, at the end of the day, that's the only person that matters. If you can convince yourself that you're unstoppable, like, it's a done deal, bro. Like, you are quite literally unstoppable. There's nothing no one else can ever say to you. Like, yeah, like, it's just, like, it might hurt you. It might sting a little bit. Right. It might put you in your feels for the rest of the day. But ultimately...
Playing the weekend all the rest of the day.
Drake.
All sad.
If you fully believe that you can do it, then, like, you do. And I think, like, once you do it once,
right,
like, you, like, try again. Yep. And, like, you might fail, like, when you try again, but, like, you'll try it again, and then, like, eventually you have a track record of, like, little successes.
Right.
And, like, after a certain point, like, you're unstoppable. Like, you have a track record now.
You know you can accomplish it because you've accomplished this before, so it's not like something new anymore.
But I think what you mentioned is, like, so important. Like, the very beginning, that very first accomplishment that seems just, like, miles away. I think you have to want it. And I think for me, it's like I had, like, the world around me was, like, burning, right? So it's like, if I don't do this, and by this I mean, like, just being the best student that I can, because when I came back from Mexico, that was sort of my mentality. Like, I want to be the best version of myself, and that means being the best son that I can, the best brother that I can, be the best student that I can first and foremost. So I remember after my first year, like, I ended up with straight A's on my transcript. And again, like, I was working hard in school, but that wasn't necessarily, like, my end goal. Like, I was just, like, in my whole virtue of, like, being the best student that I can. My parents were already, like, sort of, like, struggling with their own financial problems, and with my younger brother, I was like, okay, I don't want to be another burden to them. So I got the grades, and then I got the 501c3 status, and then I got, like, the water boilers for them, and I got, like, the website up and running. I got, like, the t-shirts up and running. Like, again, like, small successes. And I think it's also super important to see how you define a success.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, if someone opened the door and bought a shirt, or at the very least, if they opened the door, like, bro, that was a success for me, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I defined my success, like, I'm going to sell 20 shirts today, and if I don't, then it's going to be a failure. Like, bro, you're setting yourself up for a disaster.
Yeah, I think that's super true. Because a lot of people, everyone says they want it, right? Everyone. But at the end of the day, it's your actions that are going to say if you truly want it or not. Because there's people, the reason why this podcast is called 4 a.m. Empire is because at 4 a.m. there's two types, right? People are either going to sleep because they've been hustling all day, all night, or they're waking up early before everyone else is up to get a head start. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's super important to, count every little step and, be patient throughout the process, especially when you're young.
Yeah,
I remember being 15, 16, 17. I always had big ambitions, but it wasn't till years later where I actually started doing and getting the results, right? And
it all builds up on each other, and it all takes time. And so, like, to your question, like, how do you keep on going? How do you maintain that motivation? I think if you just reframe how you define success, it will go a long way. So, like, for me, like, showing up to school on time was starting to, like, feel like a success, right? Yeah. Like, having someone open that door for me was sort of a success. Until eventually, like, I had actual, like, concrete successes that I could show to other people, show to my parents, show to myself, like, hey, I got all A's this year. Hey, I got this nonprofit status. Hey, like, we quite literally got the water boiler so that you can all have warm water. Like, this. Now,
how was it? Did you guys go and deliver it? Did you see the people that received the water boilers, or was it like you sent them the money and?
So we saw the people, but we didn't buy the water boiler. We went with we gave the money to the director guy, who then had people within Tijuana who got it for them.
But did you go visit after it was installed?
I didn't visit after, but I visited beforehand. And I think the way that I sort of try to interact with more underserved communities, even where I come from, I tried to make it so that it wasn't like, I think a lot of organizations nowadays have sort of like this savior mentality, like, oh, here I am bringing all this food, and here I am like with this money to help you, like poor people out, like thank me, whatever. I remember I intentionally tried to avoid doing that, especially with guidance of my parents. So it was more so of like, okay, we're gonna just like give what we came to give and like leave it at that. Like the thank yous, like the thank you first and foremost is like from God, right? Like the blessings that we have in our life, like that's already a thank you and enough. Like the fact that we were able to do this is like the thank you that we need. And so in terms of like seeing how like it impacted their lives or talking to them or whatever, it wasn't super important to me because I was like, you're gonna have warm water regardless of like if you care or not, or if it made your life better or worse or whatever. Like you're going to have warm water, and that is already important. And also like beforehand, like it was, I just like every project I did, I discussed it with like whoever was in charge, because they know the problems first and foremost, right? So it's like if they tell me this is a problem and if it's solved, then like I will trust that like that's like that is a thing. And so anyway, so then with Face It, I started like doing more iterations of that, right? So we also ended up buying school uniforms for an all-boys orphanage outside of Guadalajara, and just like more iterations, you know, like buying, fundraising, trying to just showcase that like, hey, this is what we're trying to do, buy a t-shirt or just flat out donate. And so around, again, simultaneously, by the end of freshman year, I decided like, okay, I'm going to graduate early. I don't want to do this anymore. Like this sucks. And so I remember I went to my high school counselor and
that's a different like perspective of most people. Like most people say school sucks, I'm gonna drop out. Yeah. And instead you said school sucks, I'm gonna graduate earlier than everybody else. And get it over with, right? That's such a different like take on it.
What made you want to graduate and not drop out?
Well, because like I had like more aspirations that required more of a degree, right? Yeah. So like in 5th grade, I moved schools a lot because like whenever rent increased, like we had to move around a lot. But I remember like in 5th grade, I ran for student body president, and I was like, okay, like, and I won, right? And so I was like, wow, like this is cool, like I can like do stuff. And like again, like it's 5th grade, you can't actually do much, but like having the position and like running meetings or whatever, I was like, this is like interesting. And then like in 8th grade again, I ran for student body president, I won. And then freshman year of high school, like during that first month of school, brand new school, whatever, I ran for freshman class president and I won. And so I was just like, okay, maybe this is like, maybe I want to do something more in like public service and government, like being in a position where you can like administer and structure things to make people's lives better was really appealing to me. The magnet school that I was, the technical school, was like for medical. It was like a medical program I was in. I was convinced I wanted to be a doctor. And then after going through that, I was like, okay, I don't want to be a doctor. So that was like cut out. And so it sort of like brought me back to like that point, right? Like maybe I do want to do.
Now, how important was finding out that you didn't want to do that? Because a lot of people are like, oh, what if I don't like it? What if I try it and I don't like it? Like, what's your experience on trying something that you think you wanted to do, and that time that some people might consider wasted? But I think it might even be like a positive thing.
Right? Again, it sort of goes back to like, what are you going to do alternatively? Like, what's the alternative? If you're not going to explore, like, what else are you going to do? Like, sit on your ass and like, just go on about your life? Sit there, just sit on your butt and just like wait, like, you know? And so I think there's no such thing as a wasted time when you're trying to find out what you actually care about. Like it doesn't exist.
Right. Good quote.
Like no matter how long it takes, no matter how old you are, like it's not a waste of time, because it's like it's your life, bro. It's quite literally your life. And it's especially true when you're young, because like you don't have, like, I was 15, right? So like I couldn't get a job even if I wanted to. So it's like, what else are you going to do? Like, okay, explore, right? So even though that term wasn't the best, and I realized I just did not want to go in the medical profession field, it gave me something valuable, right? It gave me, like, it's like if you're taking a test and there's A, B, C, D, E, you eliminated one answer, statistically speaking, the chances of you getting the right answer now just increased by X percentage.
I like that analogy.
Because you've eliminated one, right? So it was sort of like that. I was like, okay, I'm going to move on to something else. And I think it was also part of, like, my dad's influence. He was always just like, you're great at speaking. You love giving these speeches. I was like, I don't think being a doctor is for you. I don't know if you want to do it.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I remember just like one day, I don't remember exactly how this went, but I was just thinking about like, okay, like let's look at like, I started looking at biographies of people, right? So at this time, I started looking at people who like started nonprofits. I started people who started businesses. I started people who were heads of government, right? So like presidents, secretaries of state.
You were 16 at this time?
I was 16 now. And I'm like, who are these people, right? Like, who are the people who created this company? Who is the person who has ran this country? At the moment, it was Obama. So, like, I went on Wikipedia and I just looked up Obama, like, just this basic Wikipedia page. And I just started reading about his life. I was like, okay.
What's some fun information or something you learned there that you can share with us?
About Obama?
Yeah.
I think what stood out to me was the fact that he went to Columbia University, which is in New York City. And so I remember, like, I looked up Columbia, and I was like, okay, like, Columbia is part of the Ivy League, and there's 8 schools in there. And so once you look at one, like, you look at all of them, right? There's Dartmouth, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, etc. And so I started looking at these schools, and then I remember I looked up at Bill Clinton, and he went to Georgetown. And then I looked up just like a whole bunch of other people. The CEO of Zappos. Zappos is headquartered in Vegas. And the
What
CEO
is Zappos,
of Zappos,
for those who don't know?
Zappos, it's like the shoe company. It's basically they do a lot of stuff, but it's just online apparel. But the CEO of Zappos went to Harvard, and so I was like, okay, like I'm seeing a reoccurring of these same schools popping up in every biography that I read, in every book that I read. And so then I started thinking about like, okay, I think this is why I decided to graduate early instead of dropping out. I was like, okay, like I want to go to one of these colleges. Like I don't know what it is about them, but they seem to be producing like really high achieving alumni. For whatever reason it may be, like I need to go there. And so I started looking at the websites, and if you just go to any one of these websites, it tells you generally what they look for. They look for like an excellent academic record, activities, letters of recs, test scores, etc. Like just the very basic things that you need to apply. And I had just finished my first year and I got all A's, and I was like, dang, like I'm actually on track. Like as of right now, like I actually have a shot at this. And so I was like, okay, well, since I want to get there as quickly as possible, I'm just gonna like cut off a year, because I don't want to like I don't want to be here.
How do you cut off a year?
So that I didn't know, right? I didn't know how to do that. I
would have done that too if they told me.
I went to my counselor, and I remember I was just like, I want to graduate early for XYZ reason. Can I do this? And I remember his response was, oh, that's not possible. People don't do that. Like, you can't do it. And I was like, why not? He's like, well, because you need this many credits to graduate. And the only way you take those credits is if you do summer school. And you only get, like, summer school if you're, they called it credit remedial. Credit deficient, right? So, and I thought that was so messed up. Yeah. The fact that, like, if you want to get ahead, they won't, like, pay for the classes. But if you took the class and failed it, they will let you take the class. I'm like, okay, how are you going to prioritize students who for some reason or another fail this class versus someone who just wants to like get ahead? And they weren't letting me. And so what ended up happening was like, okay, the main thing here, my main takeaway from this conversation was that like, I just need to get the credits done. And even though it hasn't been done before, this was like shortly after I got the 501c3 status. I was like, okay.
You're still on that high.
I was still on that high, right? I was like, they said I couldn't get this, and I got it. So like maybe, just maybe, I can figure out a way to graduate early. So that's all I did, right? I printed out, like I went on like the Clark County School District. I went on the website. I looked at all the requirements, and I was like, okay, I need to take 4 math classes, 4 science, 3 of this, 3 of that, 2 PE, this art, whatever. So I had this whole list, and then I literally just like on a pen and paper made my own little chart. I was like, okay, I've taken this many classes. This is how many I have left. And slowly but surely, like I started restructuring in a way that I could take all the classes I needed to graduate in 2017 instead of 2018. And the main sacrifice for that was that when the school year began again, instead of taking like 6 classes, I remember I took 9, and like half of them were like AP or like honors classes.
How did you take 9
though? So they were online. So they didn't let me take them during the summer, but they did let me take them during the school year, which just made my life worse because I didn't have to go through all, like I could have spread it out a little better. But unfortunately it just didn't work out. And so I remember, like, bro, now this is like 4 a.m. Empire, bro. I did not sleep. I didn't sleep. I remember like sophomore fall, I would like, I would wake up at 6:30. Classes would start at 7. No, I would wake up at 6:30. Sometimes I would. Luckily for me, I lived across the street from school, so I would just sprint.
Oh, that's nice.
Like I remember one time I heard the bell ring, and then you have 2-minute warning before the late bell, and I would just sprint across. And so I would wake up at 6:30. I try to wake up at 6:30, shower, eat, run to school, and then I'd stay at school until school ended at 2, and then I would be at the library until 2 to 4, and then I'd come home and take a nap from 4 to 6, and then I would just stay up all night until 4 a.m. and then go back to sleep and then wake up again at 6 a.m. And I stayed up all night because, bro, 9 classes was no joke. On top of the nonprofit, on top of
What did you take online?
Online, what did I take? I took algebra 2 something. I took another world history class, an English class. And then just my normal classes at school, and at the same time I wasn't letting up other things. I was still in student government. I remember my sophomore year I did tennis. No, I did track. I did track freshman year. Then I did tennis. Then I did wrestling, and then I did, what else did I do? Tennis, track, wrestling.
Everything.
Yeah.
Quarterback of the football team,
anything
principal.
to fill your time up there.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that's the thing. So when I was on season, I would, after school, I'd go to practice, and then I would take my nap.
It had to be.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Yeah.
It's really important sometimes.
If you take
especially
one of those,
if you go hard and you're going to sleep at 4 a.m. You need it.
You need to. And then sometimes I would have shirt orders and stuff were really ramping up now. So I would run from school to school, delivering the shirts, giving the speeches.
How were you advertising your shirts? Were you still going door to door? Were you doing online sales? What was going on with that?
I had a website so people could see it online.
Mm-hmm.
I put them on my personal Instagram, so I'd put it on I would just post it this is if you go on my Instagram at Face It Official.
Scroll all the way down.
If you scroll down.
What's your at?
My at for the nonprofit now is Face It Official _ I believe, and then my name's just Emmanuel.Berrelleza. Berrelleza. Emmanuel.
We'll link it.
Yeah, all right, you'll link it. But anyways, I would just post it so people would DM me. They'd give me this, and sometimes it'd be so far away from the city that I couldn't go, but I would know someone who lived there, so I'd give them the shirt to give them the shirt to give me the $10, and then it was just a whole mess of
whole
finances and this, and simultaneously I'd contact businesses because I had the 501c3 now, so I'd contact Applebee's and Panera Bread and doing all these car washes and fundraisers to try to get more money in because I just had these bigger ideas to help more people in more countries and more whatever. And so I was just running on fumes every single day, but I was doing it right. And again, I think the power of being so youthful, right? You have energy and you have time.
That's true.
So you can do it, right? And so I was doing that.
You're never gonna be younger than you are today, right?
Bro, I remember at some
good
point,
one.
Thank you.
That's a good quote.
Keep going.
I remember when I turned 16, I was also able to get a job now. And so I got a job at an ice cream shop. And so again, this is all happening at the exact same time, bro. The classes, the job, the nonprofit, the online schooling, the normal schooling, the clubs,
what
the
did they feed you, bro?
You're not human.
Yeah, what did they feed you? What did you eat?
I didn't eat, bro.
Ice cream. You sneak ice cream at the ice cream shop.
No, I remember in the mornings, I would just I'd be so exhausted that I didn't have enough time to get a formal breakfast. The mornings I wouldn't eat. And then during lunch, we only had, I think, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And the lunch lines were so long because when you go to an underserved school that's just overpopulated, the lunch lines are ridiculously long.
Everyone needs that.
Because everyone needs it. So your alternative is to stay in line to get the free lunch, or you have money to get hot Cheetos and an iced tea. I'm I don't have money and I don't have time to wait in these long lines because there'd be a lot of times where you'll wait in line and you still wouldn't get the food. So I would just go straight to the library and continue answering my emails, making my phone calls. So I wouldn't eat breakfast, I wouldn't eat lunch, and then when I got home, my mom still wasn't home. So I would, and there was usually nothing in the fruits. Maybe I'll make a sandwich, maybe I'll make eggs. Usually I ate a lot of eggs. That's the only thing I knew how to cook. But usually I would take the nap, and then when I would wake up, then my mom would come and then she'd make something. But I really wouldn't eat, and it was really unhealthy now that I think about it. No sleep, no eating, doing all these things.
You're a kid, it's fine.
But you're a kid, right?
Yeah,
I don't
fine.
I don't think I'd be able to pull it off as effectively as I did now. There's just no way. I was on some other.
Now here's a quick question because you're going through all these classes, you're not sleeping, you're obviously booked throughout the day, no time to do any of this.
Mm-hmm.
How did it affect, or how did you overcome the fact that people your age are not doing this? So I'm sure you got a lot of people that, you know, were like, oh, dude, this kid's weird. Like, what is he doing? Like, right? Like, I'm sure 90% of your classmates and people in your class are like, why are you trying to graduate early? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Like, just enjoy your time. Like, you don't need to be doing this.
It's just the same thing, right? Like, people's opinions. And I think that goes out throughout all of
I've
life.
gotten it a lot. I'm sure you have
especially
as well.
during your teenage years, though. That's where you feel it the most.
Like, it's not cool to, like, try in a class.
And the hardest thing in those teenage years, because now we see the perspective. Now we've gone through it, and we've seen, like, okay, yeah, like, we've gone through the like, criticism and stuff. But when you're in high school, that's something that's really important to you.
Right.
Getting accepted by your classmates is something that is important as a teenager.
Yeah.
So how were you able to overcome that?
For some reason, bro, I just did not care. Like, I could care less because, again, like, my family is in a crisis. For me, it's like I care so much more about the well-being of, like, my brother and me and my family than I do about whatever, like... Yeah. Esmeralda from
it just seems stupid to you, basically.
It seems really silly to me.
All the gossip, all the opinions, everything else compared to reality, which is your reality, it just seems dumb, right? And I think in this 100%. Country, we're very fortunate. You know, it ends up hurting a lot of people in reality because we're kind of, like Gary Vee says this a lot, where, like, we're raised in a zoo. It's a fake environment, right? Yeah. But if you go to other countries that are poor, where you don't have anything, like, their reality is much different. So they approach life with a different lens, right?
100%.
And I mean, I was fortunate enough to not grow up in, you know, something in a very bad environment, but I'm also very fortunate to not have been over coddled and still realize what you know, like what the reality is. Yeah.
And I think it's super important. I think my home environment definitely played a role. Because, like, even the few people who, like, did talk badly about me or would make these remarks, like, bro, you have to understand, I lived with my biggest haters, bro. Like, my siblings, like, there was absolutely nothing that I heard at school that I did not first hear at home. Like, there's, like, literally nothing. So it sort of, like, built... like thicker skin,
like an immune system.
Opinions. Like the opinions from your classmates was nothing. That's it. That's all you got.
And like, and like again, going back to like what you said earlier on like how do you like have that confidence? How do you build that track record? It was like, bro, like you can hate on me, but like I'm your class president, so what are you gonna do? You know, like you can hate on me, but I have some sort of agency. I have some sort of leverage. And so it was like, okay, like I was so focused on me, to be honest. Like I was really focused on me. And I think the people who saw that and who respected that are like my friends to this day, bro. Like those people who like got close to me and was like, hey, bro, like, how did you do that? Like, I want to do something similar. The people who like wanted to learn something and be my friends. Because you also have to understand, like, I moved so many times that I didn't have any actual like friends. I didn't have like close friends to like be with. So I was just like, okay, like, and I also for some reason didn't quite understand like the mentality of like people back then. Like I don't know. I was never really on the same wavelength as many people throughout my entire life. And I think when I got to high school, it became really evident, but at least now I had something to fight for. So I remember like I had a PE class and I would literally just like read the whole time. Like I would hide in the back of the gym while people were like playing like indoor soccer or whatever.
You were that kid.
I was that kid who would just like, I would just like read like books because I was just like I don't care to like play soccer right now. I don't care to like meet people. I don't care to just like walk around the field like talking about what are you talking about that could help me at all.
I still think that way up to this day.
Yeah, and I don't know.
But for like the majority of high school kids, that's a hard thing to overcome.
It is
more than adversity, more than not having food, more than this. I've spoken to a lot of kids and their biggest question is like, dude, like I try to do something and the rest of the people pull me back down, right? Yeah. And it's like a mental thing, and it's really hard to overcome. It's very, very few people, like many of us, but I've fallen into that trap of like, oh, I'm going to do something and all this nonprofit stuff and all my books and everything, and I'd hide it from people my own age. Like if I meet a parent, it's like, oh yeah, I've written books, or if I meet a potential sponsor, I'd share it with them. But at school, I wouldn't even bring my books because, you know, I was afraid of what, you know, not fitting in. And that's tough for high schools. Do you have any advice on things people can do, or it's just
you either got it or you
gotta
don't?
Face it. No, you gotta face it.
I think you gotta face it is definitely one point, but I think and I actually write this in the book that I wrote / am still editing. There's a whole chapter
called... You have a title for that?
It's in the works. I have a title, but the title right now is Your World is Yours, What Do You Want? That's the title right now, but there's a whole chapter that I write called Anchoring Your Why. And so I write extensively about this. Like, before you go out on any sort of adventure or any sort of goal or any sort of thing that you want, like, you have to quite literally anchor, like, you know, like when you, like in the movies, you have like the little like SpongeBob anchor that like keeps the ship ashore.
Yeah.
Like, you have to have that be your why, and you have to anchor it. Like, it has to be immovable, because you will get like that hate, you will get those doubts, you will take a class and you won't do good on that exam, and then you'll reconsider how smart you actually think you are. You will get rejected 3 times from the IRS. Like, you will have like
from the IRS.
Like, you will
Very
have
specific.
like doors shut on you. You will have like people say things, and it will get to you. Like, it's just a flat lie to say it won't get to you. And I can't say just face it, because it's so much more complicated than that. But I think if you anchor your why, and by that I mean like really, like, be sure about, like, remind yourself of the reasons of why you're doing this. Like, why are you waking up at 4 a.m.? Why are you still knocking on doors? And if that reason is really strong to you, and if it's really compelling, like, that should be enough. And if it's not enough, then you have to reconsider your why, or you have to reconsider your goal, because clearly the goal does not outweigh the why. And there has to be some sort of balance there. But I think if you have your why anchored, it will be enough to help you push through. And, like, maybe not even, like, both those three. And I know a lot of times, like, you know, like a lion, like, you're just going to, like, take it on and face it head on. Sometimes it doesn't look like that. Sometimes it's just, like, taking another step, as much as it hurt, as painful as it was, with as much criticism as there is. Like, sometimes that is also as equally as forceful as, like, facing it head on.
Yeah.
And so for me, my why was, like, my parents, right? My why was my family. My why was my life, my personal life. Like, what, in the book I write, like, what do you see when you wake up? Like, who do you talk to? How do you get to school? Like, I didn't like the answers for any of that in my personal life. And so, like, that was my why to me. I was like, my why is, like, getting home to school. And, like, fortunately, unfortunately, I was reminded of it every single day. And so every single day, like, I worked really hard for it. So for those students who, like, want to do something and they're afraid of the judgment from their peers, or maybe even their own family members or their own parents, just really spend time on the why. Like, don't focus so much on, like, the actual end goal, because chances are it will change. It will change.
Yeah.
But just anchoring yourself on the why, on why you want this or why this is so important for you, is I think it's everything. And so fast forward a little bit, I took all the classes. I ended up graduating a year early. I ended up becoming valedictorian of my class. Nice. I ended up with, like, thousands of dollars in scholarships. And I got accepted. Like, I ultimately did end up getting accepted to Columbia University, which is where, like, Obama ended up going. And so for me, it was just like, I ended up committing. I was like, I got into Georgetown, I got into Dartmouth, I got into Columbia, I got into Berkeley, USC, UCLA, etc. And so for me, it was just like, wow, like, I got this thing. And even then, even when I got my college acceptances, I didn't fully know what they meant. Like, I didn't know how it would change my life. I didn't know what the implications were. But all that mattered was that I got it. I got the college acceptances. I got the money to pay for school.
One step closer to your goal.
One step closer, bro. One step closer towards what? Like, at that moment, I didn't exactly know.
But it felt good.
But at least it was one step closer away from where I was.
True.
And everything was burning. And I think that's super important. Like, it might not be a step closer to where you want to be, but as long as it's a step closer away from where it's just really not a good place for you, I think is also a win. And so now in my present day, like, I can just go, like, days and hours about every little detail and every little thing and every little anecdote and story for everything that I did, from, like, test taking to classes to whatever.
So you're a really good speaker is what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that there's a lot to say.
Yeah.
So with your present day, to close out, what are you up to nowadays, and what would you leave people watching, and anyone that might be in your position, what can you say to them?
Yeah. So nowadays I'm actually in quarantine with everyone.
True. I think we've
been in the studio for 3 days. We haven't been. No, I'm kidding.
We only got Red Bulls.
Yeah. So what have I been to nowadays? I think ever since starting college, I think my personal journey has been to gain as much perspective as possible, in any form that I can be. So I've, like, last year I lived and worked in Paris with the Ministry of Education. I just came back from Buenos Aires a few days ago. doing another study abroad. If all goes well, which I hope it does, I'll be in Russia this summer taking more classes. Russia. And the next year I got accepted for exchange at Oxford, taking more government classes. And then I'm going to be applying to law school and things of that sort. But I think I've been trying to just gain more perspective by traveling because my school has allowed me to do that. But just by talking to people, bro. Talking to like you guys, whoever Miguel introduces me with, reading books when I can, listening to podcasts. But I think the most useful form for me and what I hope people can take out of is just be really curious and don't be afraid to ask your questions. I think every single accomplishment that I have accomplished has been as a result of asking a question. Can I graduate early? How do I fill out this paperwork? How do I get into college? It's always been a matter of asking questions, but you have to know like the right questions to ask. And in order to do that, you have to know where you want to go. And in order to know where you want to go, you have to figure out your why. And again, it's like this whole process that I sort of actually try to outline in my book, so be on the lookout for that. It probably won't be ready for like another year or so. I don't know, but
we'll interview you again once you have it.
Part 2 will be coming out.
Zoom, hopefully.
Part 2.
I would say if there's anything that I could say is like definitely be curious and ask your questions. And even if you don't have internet access or if you have limited access to like books or libraries, conversation is free. And I think that's something that I've really took to heart. Like I conversated with anyone. At one point, I really wanted to be a teacher, I think. And so I talked to my teachers. I said, why are you a teacher? Like what decisions in your life led you to this? Did you consider doing other stuff? How did you get to where you are today? Like if you just start off with that question towards anyone, like even ask your parents, ask your mom, ask your dad. Because I think that's something so underrated, especially if you're young. Yeah. You just assume mom and dad got there and they just somehow magically got there. But no, mom and dad have a story.
Or there's also a lot of people that they're just not born extroverted that want to go talk to everyone, right?
Yeah.
And like you mentioned earlier, I think it's very important to be self-aware, know yourself more than anything. That way you can go the right direction for yourself. And if you're one of those people that can't just go up to anyone and talk to them, then like you said, talking to your family sometimes is all you need.
Yeah, and talking to your family or just like read a book. Like look up like whatever you want to see. Like if you want to be like the next like business mogul or whatever, like read a book. There's so many books out there, so many biographies. If you hate reading, if you absolutely hate it and you just don't like it, like go on YouTube and look up vlogs of professions that you potentially may want to be. There's so many videos out there. Yeah. So you can look at a video, read a book, have a conversation, ask as many questions as you can, as many people as you can. Because even if you ask somebody a question, the answer will always vary across different perspectives. And then whenever you gain this information, pay it forward, help someone else out. That's really all there is to it.
Awesome. Well, really excited to have Manny here and excited for what's to come. Hopefully, we see the next book that you're coming out, the more people that you're inspiring, and
thank you for the story as well. Yeah. It's a great story.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you a lot. All right, we'll catch you guys next week in the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Letters.
Peace.
Thank you for watching the first episode of the 4 a.m. Empire. If you got some value out of this, it would help us a lot if you could share, subscribe, and check out all our platforms for all the new content. We hope to see you here next week when we bring our next guest and provide some tips to help you pursue your passions, goals, and dreams.